As with most craft projects, this one started with an idea. The idea was simple enough. Take a skull, a fake one of course, and grow borax crystals on it. Then I'd have a pretty crystal skull for my shelf. I thought this would be a quick and easy craft, nay, a simple craft, to alleviate some winter blues.
I'm so bored!
And the best part was that I had everything I needed already, including the borax. No spending money for me at the beginning of this project. Foreshadowing! It was simple, quick, and easy. There was no way I could overcomplicate it or mess it up. Foreshadowing! To make borax crystals, it is quite simple. You need water and you need borax. So you need 4 parts of water and 1 part borax to make borax crystals. Basically, the idea is you submerge an object in the borax water solution, and over time, it grows these beautiful crystals on top of it. Thinking it would be easy, I didn't realize that I didn't have a whole lot of additional items to add crystals to. I feel like a lot of times I run headfirst into a craft without thinking it through. Just, oh, you got the borax. Do you have things to use with it? Oh, we'll just make it up as we go along. Yeah, we'll see how that turns out. So I ran around my house searching for a couple of extra things because I had this plastic painted skull. I grabbed a foam skull and a rubber snake. And my painted skull, which was a terrible idea and I should have known better, as we'll see shortly. Foreshadowing! So I mixed up my borax solution. I added the black food coloring to see if I could make black crystals. But black food coloring is not just made up of black food coloring. It's made up of another color that's just darkened. So say you have black food coloring, but it's maybe blue that's just a really dark blue that it looks black. See where I'm going with this? I then attempted to submerge the styrofoam skull. This went as well as expected because it's styrofoam and it floats. So I rigged up a contraption with the help of my husband Justin to keep the foam in the water. Honestly, like most of this experiment, I wasn't entirely confident the foam wouldn't just melt in the warm water. Then I placed my painted skull in the water and did predict this, but I did it anyway because I like to live dangerously with my crafting. Yeah, you guessed it, the acrylic paint just peeled right off the plastic. It's warm water that you're putting that crap in. Should have known better. Did I? Yes. Did I do it anyway? Yes. Did I learn my lesson? No. No, I didn't. I also put the rubber snake in a little container and covered it with some of the solution. And then I was thinking, what else can I throw in here? Because I have so much borax water solution left, there's got to be other things I can grow crystals on, right? So I grabbed one of the dried roses that I had left over from my grandmother's funeral. Probably not the best choice, but again, crafting frenzy, you don't make the best decisions here, people, okay? And I rummaged through my cupboard where I have all my planter pots, thinking if I had a clay pot, maybe that it would adhere to the clay pot. So I grabbed one of those and stuck it in the solution as well. I left these items in the water for over 12 hours, so until the next day, and then I checked on them. Surprisingly, the pot didn't have very many crystals on it. I feel like this might have been because at that point in time there wasn't enough borax in the solution, like it wasn't as saturated as it should have been. And if it was more saturated at that time, I feel like it would have had a better outcome and it would have had a really cool look. So that I think is worth trying, especially if you have a clean clay flower pot. I definitely think it would work for you. The poor little snake, when I pulled him out of the water, the crystals were flaking off immediately, as if the snake was trying to shed some crystallized skin or something. They did not stick to the rubber. From what I was reading, apparently things that you need to submerge kind of have to have something for the crystals to grip to, and the snake didn't, so it just didn't really work. The dried flower looked cool, but again, not too many crystals on it. It changed the color, which was interesting, most likely because of the dye, but not too many crystals on it, which I feel like was probably because of the solution at the time. So again, I think if it was more saturated, we would have had a better outcome with the dried flower. The foam skull was the most surprising because it actually grew on them and it didn't melt in the water. I was shocked when I pulled it out and it looked cool. I had used the black dye, but again, not fully black. So it's made from like a really dark blue or purple. And so it sort of dyed the surface of the skull a little bit. And the crystals weren't really like the black color that I was hoping for, unfortunately. But they did grow crystals on it and it didn't melt. Score 1 for the good guys. At this point, I was not satisfied, however, even with my success with the foam skull. My journey down the rabbit hole of making borax crystals had just begun. A curiosity loop had opened, and I had a thirst that would not be quenched until I made more. I started to think, what else could I grow crystals on? I read online that unpainted ceramic bisque worked really well for this. So I thought, in my infinite wisdom, I would search online, find a ceramic skull, order that baby, get it to my house in like a couple of days because Amazon, and I would make more borax up and have a crystal skull. I was really disappointed though because it's January and not September or October that the ceramic skulls I found online cost $50. So that was out. So what do you do in this situation when you just need more? I did what any sane person would do. I went to the craft store. So my daughter Sonia and I set out to the craft store and we found a few objects to crystallize. I'll let Past Us tell you about it.
I'm here with Sonia. So we ended up getting these little eggs because it's Easter stuff is out. This cute little dinosaur.
We used molds and air dry clay. Yes, I know. Please stop yelling at your screen. I know. It was a mistake. But you have to understand, I was so desperate to make this work, I would try anything. Even though I knew it was probably doomed for failure. Overdramatic, yes. So Sonia wanted to help. So we pressed some of the clay into molds and let them dry overnight. And I remembered I actually had skull molds that I had bought previously from the dollar store. So I used them as well as the ones, the heart and rose ones that I had bought that day, thinking if I couldn't have a skull, I could have a black heart or a black rose. We also painted some of the ceramics to see if it would make a difference between unpainted and painted ceramics in the borax solution, but also because we wanted to. That day I made up more borax solution, dyed one pot of borax solution but left the other one undyed. Then we submerged the ceramics into the water. Then we waited until the next morning. 12 hours later, these actually turned out really well when we checked them. The crystals had adhered to the ceramic and had grown on either the painted or unpainted ceramic bisque. So this worked really well. So if you have ceramic bisque or can get it, I would try this option if you want it to look like something. The only disappointed was the little dinosaur where the crystals didn't develop as much on its back. That evening after work, I checked on my air dry clay that was drying in the molds. I ended up speeding up the drying process of the thicker pieces by popping them in the oven. And yes, I did check online on the manufacturer's site to see if you could do this, and you can. 200 degrees for 20 minutes until you're happy. After my success with the ceramic bisques, I should have stopped. I really should have. I should have said, yep, it works, called it quits. But while cute, Easter eggs were not the look I was going for. I wanted my crystal skull. My hope with the clay was to make a black heart to match my dark mood this January. Once my clay was dry, I painted some of them and left some of them blank just to see if there was a difference between the ones that were painted versus unpainted. I made up more of the borax solution. I placed my pieces in the containers and poured the hot, dyed borax solution over top. And as most of you have probably guessed, not all of my clay friends survived this little experiment. When I realized that some of the clay had dissolved immediately upon pouring the water borax solution over top of them, I didn't have much hope for the rest of them. But I left them overnight anyway to see what would happen, and also because I didn't want to waste the solution that I had made up, so I thought, what the heck, we'll just leave it till morning and we'll see what happens. The next morning, I checked my experiment, and well, I'll let Pam show you. The sad part is that I should have known. I am kicking myself. Air dry clay can reactivate in water. So when you're working on a piece and it starts to dry out, you just add a little bit more water and you can keep working on it. I don't know why I didn't think that submerging the whole thing once it was dried, that it wouldn't melt. I guess I just didn't expect them to dissolve completely once they were set. I was surprised to see that some of the pieces did survive, the larger pieces in fact. However, they did take a long time to dry afterwards because it made the clay so wet. And the crystals didn't really form too well on them. They remained very small and tiny just on the surface of them. And unfortunately, they sort of look like mutations made by some sort of mad crafter. Yeah, that's me. I'm the mad crafter. So I left these pieces to dry, and knowing that I would have to toss out these pieces because they were a failure, my crystal skull obsession was not satisfied. As my husband left to work, he begged me to stop.
Just stop. You've done enough. You can't crystallize everything.
To which I replied, never! My crafting hunger was not satiated, and I had one more idea to try. The tiny skulls in the tiny little molds. These little guys had worked out so well in the molding process that I wanted to try them with polymer clay. I also wanted to see how the crystals actually grew on pipe cleaners, which is what people normally use when they do this experiment. So I made my tiny skulls and baked them in the oven, and then removed them from the molds and baked them some more. And I made a pipe cleaner rose. I heated up my water, 8 cups of water, and added 2 cups of borax to begin. I have found over the process of making this so many times this week that if you start with the water being heated slightly before you add the borax, it has a better chance of dissolving into the water. Then I continued to add more borax to the solution until the solution was saturated. I then dyed some of the water with food dye that will no longer be used for anything else, because I had double dipped into my dye when adding it to the borax solution. Then I distributed the water into the containers. I covered the pipe cleaner rose immediately because I had it already set up on a little contraption where it was hanging in. This is probably the easiest way to do this because you can wrap the pipe cleaner stem around a little dowel and just sit it over a container, and then it'll hang down into the water, and as long as it's not touching the bottom, you're good to go. I let the water for the clay cool slightly before adding the pieces. I also put my dino back in upside down, hoping that some crystals would grow on the back where they had come off. Then I waited, and I'm impatient. I removed one of the little skulls after 2 hours just to check it. Small crystals had begun to form. They were very granular at this point in time. And the best part is, my clay skulls were still intact. I left the others in and checked them after 4 hours. At this point, there was slightly more defined crystals. After 6 hours, I decided to remove the rest. Normally, I would have left them longer to grow larger crystals, but because they're sitting on the bottom of the tray and the tray grows crystals as well on the bottom of it, They were sort of becoming covered by the crystals on the bottom of the tray. I didn't want them to get lost in that crystal formation on the bottom of my little containers. Even after 6 hours, I had to chip the tiny little skulls out, kind of like chipping something out that's been frozen in ice. Next time, I think I would try to hang them somehow, or have a tiny little grate that I could sit them on in the solution just to raise them up enough that they would be off the bottom. When they're left on the bottom of the tray, when you do remove them, some of the crystal gets pulled away from the side of the object that you put in there, which is what happened around even the Easter eggs, the little dinosaur feet, and any of the little crystal skulls around the edge of them. So you're losing some of the crystals as you have to pull them out. But finally, I had my crystal skulls! Even though I had one at the beginning, and I could have left it at that. And while they weren't as large as I was hoping, they did crystallize and they were very sparkly. As far as the pipe cleaner flower is concerned, that worked really well. Really well. If I could figure out how to make pipe cleaner skulls that were a little smaller, I would totally do that and crystallize them and see what that looked like. I think it might be past my skill levels, but I could make a flower. After all of this, the foam skull ended up looking like the closest thing to my imagined crystal skull. And it was one of the first things I had made. Couldn't just leave it alone. No. So I probably didn't need to go to all the trouble of making more. But I just couldn't help myself. Perhaps Overkill is my middle name. Let me know in the comments which crystal object you like the best. And let me know what you think we should do with the rest of these clay skulls. I have a few of them left and I could easily make more. So if you have any ideas for a project for them, drop it down below. By the way, this quiet gentleman's name is Fred. Fred the Dead. Thanks so much for watching. My name is Pam, and this is Total Pamarchy, the craft channel with a little anarchy. Until next time, bye.